What's up, guys? Mud Puppy here. Got a garage full of mostly Hondas and this thing. I've been seeing a lot of the same issues on Hondas as far as things people overlook maintenance-wise, especially people that mud ride Hondas. So making this video to point out a few things and maybe save you guys some money and save you a motor. So listen up. I see these issues all the time. So I'm not roasting anybody. We're going to use this machine as an example. One of the biggest mistakes I see that people with mud ride and go deep is they glue their airbox lid on. If you glue on your airbox lid, you cannot properly service your air filter. Everyone's like, oh, it's a Honda. That doesn't matter. It doesn't need a clean air filter. This one just got a brand new OEM air filter. Having a clean air filter really matters, especially if you're mud riding, because water is going to get into your airbox from time to time, and it's going to be sloshing around, right? You're hitting bumps, it's splashing onto the filter. The filter's going to get dirty. If you have a nice, clean, oiled filter, it'll keep that sand out of your throttle body, your valves, and your piston. If your air filter gets really dirty and it gets saturated, right, with mud, it'll start pulling it through, and then you're going to have all kinds of engine problems. You're going to be putting a top end on it prematurely, scratching the cylinder walls, wearing up the rings, and it can also cause valve issues and throttle body issues, out of control valves, stuff like that. Maintaining your air filter is key. You cannot do that if you glue your airbox lid on. Now, if you're having issues with the airbox lid leaking and you don't like the couple drops that get in there, you can put a new OEM Honda gasket on here and put some dielectric grease, and that's like a 99% solution. You can also jam a fatter gasket in here. I like to use ones off of like a Pioneer 1000 or a Talon. Their airbox gaskets are fatter. And then OMC also sells a gasket that's awesome when it's in stock. They're out of stock right now. That's a good solution. So you don't need to glue your airbox lid on to have it watertight. There are better options. Another reason you don't glue your airbox lid on is after you go deep. Say you do a hole apart ride and you're doing Brick Lake, whatever, Gator Loop, and you're underwater the whole time. The first thing you do when you come home is take the engine cowl off, clean the motor thoroughly, right? Get all the mud off of it so you don't have all the corrosion building up. Doesn't rot out your wire harness, and then take the cowl off and leave the cowl off for a few days and leave the airbox lid off for a few days. Obviously, don't do this if you're parking the machine outside in the rain, which you should not be doing regardless. That lets all the moisture that got into your airbox and the dampness in your filter evaporate out into the ambient atmosphere instead of working its way into your throttle body and your engine. That's something I do after every ride. I leave the airbox lid. Even on my Can-Am, I do this. I take the side covers off and I open up the airbox. It gives it a chance for the moisture to escape without corroding your engine. That is the biggest mistake I see. The second biggest mistake I see is not doing enough oil changes. So if you're going in a lot of mud and water, you should be checking your oil 3 or 4 times a day. It doesn't take but a minute. It's right there on that little housing right there. Check your oil for contamination. Make sure it's not getting milky. If it gets milky and you catch it right away, you go do some oil changes, very little damage is done. If it gets milky and you don't catch it, you're screwed, right? You need a crankshaft. And you're probably thinking, well, if my snorkel doesn't go under, how could my oil get milky? The output shafts on these motors on the front and back fail all the time. I see it all the time. They fail and you don't even know it, and boom, you've got water in your oil. So you got to check your oil a lot. And if you're running in the mud, you're turning more RPMs, you have more clutch wear, your oil is going to get contaminated faster. So you need to do more oil changes than the minimum recommended in the manual if you're mud riding. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the differentials. This is not quite as important because differentials are a lot cheaper than a motor, but you should really be changing your differential fluid more and checking it frequently. Not during the ride, obviously, that's not very realistic. You need some tools to do it. At the end of the ride, though, I usually just drop my oil and put new oil in it because all these seals start to leak eventually, and I don't like my stuff to break down the trail, but almost every machine I work on for my friends has milk in the front and rear diff. On these solid axle machines like this, the seals suck, so you can grease it, or if they're working good, just change it frequently. But you guys can do a little bit of basic maintenance and save yourself a ton of money. I work on these things and I make some money doing that, and a lot of the stuff I'm fixing could have been easily prevented by just not doing stupid shit like gluing your airbox cover on. And in general, if you bring me a machine with the airbox cover glued on, I'm not going to spend 2 hours trying to get the lid off because I might crack the airbox, right? And then you're screwed. And we got to wait a couple weeks to get an airbox from Honda if they're on back order. So I usually don't mess with that. I usually say order a new airbox. They're only like 20 or 30 bucks. Order a new air filter. you know, goop it up, install it, and put it back together. Another tip, don't use this white caulking or anything like that on your airbox. This stuff doesn't seal very well and it'll release from the plastic. I like to use Ultra Black on these boots. That boot probably has a slow leak. Ultra Black on the airboxes. Now, just a few other tips while I'm making this video. If you have an old carbureted Honda, like this 300 for instance, the carburetors are kind of finicky to keep running underwater. That's pretty well understood. They have a lot of vent lines that have to be in good shape and routed appropriately. And one of the vent lines I see people mess up on all the time is the bowl overflow. So this is the vent that goes to the bottom of your carburetor. You should run this line somewhere where you can get to it conveniently and then stick something in it to plug it. This is a little Torx driver. There's a T20 stuck in there, right? So anytime you park a carbureted Honda, you should turn off your petcock in case the float sticks, and then you should have this right here plugged. So if you need to drain your bowl, you can pull this out, and then you can go around to this side of the machine with a flat blade screwdriver and get to the bowl drain. Let's see if I can see it. It's kind of dark. There it is, the bowl drain, bottom of the carburetor, and you can drain the bowl. You're gonna get water in your carburetor from time to time. They're never really 100% waterproof. Yes, the Honda will burn through a lot of the water, but if it starts sputtering, going deep, first thing to do is pull it out, drain the airbox, and then drain the carburetor bowl. So always carry a flat blade screwdriver, a long one, on a carbureted Honda. I think that's about it. Yeah, those are the mistakes I've been seeing a lot, and you know, none of it's hard stuff, guys. Just check your oil a few times on the ride. It'll save you maybe $2,000.